A simple woman was mocked at the dart tournament until her first shot hit a perfect score. The crowded bar fell silent as Valerie Simmons, dismissed and ridiculed just moments before, held the dart with practiced precision. Nobody expected what happened next. The men who'd laughed at her presence were about to learn a powerful lesson about judging someone before they've had their chance to show what they're truly capable of. The old wooden dartboard hung on the wall of Valerie Simmons' modest living room, its surface worn from years of use. At 42, Valerie stood before it, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her blue eyes focused as she held the dart between her fingers, the same way her father had taught her 30 years ago. "Keep your wrist steady, Val," she could still hear his voice. "It's not about strength, it's about consistency." She released the dart with a fluid motion, watching it land precisely in the triple 20 section. A perfect shot, just like the thousands she'd thrown before. Darts wasn't just a game for Valerie, it was a connection to her father, a decorated Navy veteran who traveled the world but always found time to play with his daughter. "That's my girl," she whispered to herself, imagining his proud smile. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from her best friend, Melissa. "Don't forget, tournament at O'Malley's tonight, 7 p.m. You promised you'd finally enter this year." Valerie took a deep breath. Public competitions weren't her thing. She preferred the quiet comfort of her living room, where no one watched or judged. But she had promised Mel, and besides, her father's voice had been especially persistent lately. "You've got a gift, kiddo. Don't hide it away." She glanced at the calendar hanging next to the dartboard. Today marked 10 years since he'd passed away from a sudden heart attack. Maybe it was time to honor him differently this year. Valerie walked to her bedroom and opened the small wooden box on her dresser. Inside lay a set of custom darts, her father's prized possession. Handcrafted with green and gold fletching, they were a gift from his Navy buddies after winning an intership tournament in '85. "The day you're ready for the real thing, these are yours," he'd told her on her 30th birthday, 2 months before he died. She'd never used them in public, keeping them as a sacred memento. But today felt different. Valerie changed into a simple white polo shirt and jeans, nothing fancy. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. This was between her and Dad. She carefully placed the dart case in her purse and grabbed her keys. As she drove toward O'Malley's bar and grill, her stomach tightened with nerves. The local dart scene was notorious for being a boys' club, especially the Thursday night tournament. Women occasionally played, but they were rarely taken seriously. Just one game, she told herself, for Dad. O'Malley's Bar and Grill hummed with the typical Thursday night energy. Sports on multiple TVs, classic rock playing through old speakers, and the distinctive thud of darts hitting cork at the far end. The air was thick with the smell of beer and fried food as Valerie pushed through the heavy wooden door. She paused at the entrance, taking in the scene. The main bar area was crowded with the after-work crowd, but the real action was happening in the back room, where the tournament was getting set up. Through the doorway, she could see a group of men gathering, many wearing team shirts from local leagues. "Val, you made it!" Melissa appeared at her side, cocktail in hand, her face lighting up. "I honestly didn't think you'd show." "Still not sure I should have," Valerie replied, eyeing the tournament room. "Nonsense. You're better than half those guys, and you know it." Valerie shrugged. "That's not really the point." "Then what is?" Melissa challenged, handing her friend a club soda with lime. "You've been hiding your talent for years. Time to let it shine." They made their way toward the tournament area. As they approached, conversations paused and several heads turned. Valerie felt the familiar weight of unwelcome attention. "Well, look who's here," a gruff voice called out. Frank Donnelly, the self-proclaimed king of the local dart scene, leaned against the wall. His red polo shirt stretched tight across his beer belly, the embroidered logo of his sponsoring bar prominently displayed. "Ladies' night is Tuesday, sweetheart." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but Valerie touched her arm. "I'm here for the tournament, Frank," she said calmly. "Is registration still open?" Frank's bushy eyebrows rose. "The tournament? This ain't bingo night at the church hall. This is serious competition." More laughter followed. Valerie kept her expression neutral, though her cheeks burned. $20 entry fee," said Tommy, the bartender who was handling registrations. Unlike Frank, he seemed neither impressed nor bothered by her presence. You get 3 qualifying rounds. Top 8 advance to the knockout stage. Valerie pulled out a 20 and handed it over. Tommy added her name to the list, which earned another round of Snickers from Frank's corner. "Looks like we'll have some entertainment tonight, boys," Frank announced, raising his beer. "Maybe she can teach us about proper dart fashion or something." Valerie ignored him, focusing instead on the tournament bracket Tommy was updating on a whiteboard. 24 participants, nearly all men she recognized from around town. Her name stood out like a sore thumb. The only woman in the competition. Valerie found a quiet spot near the back of the room, settling into a tall bar stool while watching the players warm up. The practiced movements, the concentration, the friendly trash talk, it all felt simultaneously foreign and familiar, like a language she understood but rarely spoke in public. She opened her purse and carefully removed her father's dart case. The worn leather felt warm in her hands, almost as if it carried some residual life force from the man who had treasured it for so many years. "Whoa, someone's got fancy equipment," said a voice to her right. A younger man with a neatly trimmed beard nodded toward her case. "Those custom?" "They were my father's," Valerie replied, surprised by the civil interaction. "Navy darts," he observed, noting the small anchor engraved on the case. "I'm Jake, by the way. First tournament?" "Here, yes, I'm Valerie." Jake seemed about to say more when Frank's booming voice cut through their conversation. "All right, ladies and gentlemen, mostly gentlemen, thankfully, let's get this show on the road." He clapped his hands, drawing everyone's attention. "Qualifying rounds first. 3 games of 5, 0-1, standard rules. And remember, this ain't a charity event. Winner takes the pot." The tournament director, a thin man named Bill with decades of competitions under his belt, began calling out the pairings for the first qualifiers. Valerie was scheduled in the 3rd group, which gave her time to observe and settle her nerves. She watched as the first pairs took their positions. The skill level varied. Some players were clearly serious competitors with refined techniques, while others seemed to be there more for the social aspect, their darts inconsistent, but their spirits high. Frank, unsurprisingly, made a show of his first qualifier, unnecessarily elaborate in his stance and throw. He was good, Valerie could see that, but his dramatics were more about intimidation than technique. "Don't let them get in your head," Melissa whispered, returning with another club soda for Valerie. "They're just insecure men who can't handle the idea of a woman being better than them." Valerie took a sip, her eyes still on the players. "I'm not here to prove anything to them, Mel." "Then why are you here?" Valerie's fingers traced the small anchor on her dart case. "For him, and maybe a little for me." As her group was called, Valerie stood and removed the darts from their case. The green and gold fletching caught the light from the overhead fixtures. She could feel eyes on her as she approached the line, particularly Frank and his cronies, who had positioned themselves nearby, clearly anticipating entertainment. "Ladies first," her opponent said with a smirk that suggested it wasn't a courtesy, but an assumption of advantage. Valerie nodded, her focus narrowing to the board. Everything else, the noise, the stares, the judgments, began to fade away. Valerie's first opponent was a middle-aged man named Dennis, who managed one of the local hardware stores. He wasn't particularly skilled, but carried himself with the unearned confidence of someone who assumed he'd easily beat a female competitor. "Don't worry, I'll go easy on you," he said, with a wink that made Valerie's stomach turn. She said nothing, taking her position at the throw line. The standard game of 5-0-1 required players to start at that score and work down to exactly 0, finishing on a double. It was a game of strategy as much as skill, knowing which numbers to target and when to set up the final shot. Valerie took a deep breath and threw her first dart. It landed squarely in the triple 20, worth 60 points. Her second hit the same section, the third found the single 20th. Her first turn, 140 points. A murmur rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Dennis's smirk faded slightly. "Beginner's luck," someone muttered. Dennis stepped up, his throws landing in single numbers, a mediocre first round of 43 points. The gap in skill was immediately apparent, but few seemed ready to acknowledge it. Valerie maintained her focus through the game, hitting triple sections with remarkable consistency. When she closed out the game by hitting a double 16 to reach exactly 0, she'd won the first match in just 21 darts, a score good enough for professional play. That was unexpected, Bill, the tournament director, noted as he recorded her score. Frank Donnelly had stopped his own game to watch, his eyes narrowing as Valerie collected her darts from the board. "Nice shooting," Jake, the younger player, said as she returned to her seat. "Where'd you learn to play like that?" "My father taught me. We played every Sunday after church." Her next two qualifying matches followed a similar pattern: initial dismissal, followed by silence as her true skill became evident, culminating in comfortable victories. By the end of the qualifying rounds, Valerie had posted the second highest overall score, behind only Frank, whose face had grown increasingly sour with each of her successes. The crowd around her matches had grown as word spread through the bar. She could hear the whispers. "Who is she? Never seen her before. Plays like a pro." Bill posted the brackets for the knockout stage. Valerie was seeded second, which meant she wouldn't face Frank until the final, assuming they both made it that far. As she returned from checking the bracket, Melissa hugged her. "You're amazing! Did you see their faces?" Valerie allowed herself a small smile. "It's just getting started, Mel." In the corner, Frank was deep in conversation with his friends, occasionally glancing in Valerie's direction. She recognized the look in his eyes, the wounded pride of a man who suddenly realized his kingdom might be under threat. The knockout stage of the tournament brought a different energy to the room. The casual players had been eliminated, leaving only the serious competitors. The stakes felt higher, the focus sharper. Frank made sure his matches were loud affairs, playing to the crowd and celebrating each good throw with exaggerated gestures. In contrast, Valerie maintained her quiet concentration, letting her skill speak for itself. She dispatched her quarterfinal opponent, a college kid with a good eye but inconsistent technique, with methodical precision. During a brief break before the semifinals, Valerie stepped outside for some fresh air. The evening had grown cooler, a welcome relief from the stuffy bar atmosphere. She took a moment to collect her thoughts, remembering her father's advice before competitions. "Breathe, center yourself, and remember, it's just you and the board. Everything else is noise." The door opened behind her, and Frank stepped out, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He lit it, taking a long drag before acknowledging her presence. "So, where have you been hiding all this time?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "Someone who plays like you doesn't just appear out of nowhere." "I've never been hiding," Valerie replied evenly. "I just play at home." Frank exhaled a cloud of smoke. "You know what's going to happen, right? You might have impressed some people with your little show, but when it comes down to it, this is my tournament, always has been." The intimidation tactic was transparent, but Valerie merely shrugged. "May the best player win." "Oh, they will," Frank replied, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under his heel before returning inside. Back in the tournament area, the semifinals were about to begin. Valerie's opponent was Jake, the younger player who'd been friendly earlier. "Good luck," he said genuinely. "Though I don't think you'll need it." Their match drew the largest crowd yet. Word had spread throughout the bar about the mysterious woman with the golden arm, and even patrons who'd never watched a dart game in their lives had gathered to witness the phenomenon. Jake was skilled, one of the best in the room, but Valerie's consistency was unmatched. As she stepped up for what could be her final throw of the match, needing a double eight to advance to the finals, a hush fell over the spectators. She poised her dart, her father's voice clear in her mind. "Take your time. Visualize the target. Let it flow naturally." The dart left her fingers with perfect balance, striking the thin double ring precisely. "And that's it," Bill announced. "Valerie advances to the finals against Frank." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then growing more enthusiastic. Even some of Frank's usual supporters seemed impressed by what they had witnessed. Frank himself stood silent at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable as Valerie shook Jake's hand. "Looks like we've got ourselves a proper showdown," Bill said, checking his watch. "Finals in 15 minutes, folks." The atmosphere crackled with tension as Valerie and Frank took their positions for the final. O'Malley's had never been so packed on a Thursday night. Word had spread quickly, drawing curious onlookers from throughout the bar. Some even stood on chairs in the back to get a better view. The format for the final was different. Best of 5 games, 5-0-1 double in, double out. A more challenging variation that required precision from start to finish. A true test of skill and nerve. Ladies first, Frank said, gesturing to the line with mock chivalry. Let's see if you can handle the pressure of the big stage. Valerie stepped up, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. She removed her father's darts from their case one last time, the green and gold fletching brilliant under the spotlights. For the first time that evening, her hand trembled slightly. This was no longer just another game. This was for her father, for herself, for every woman who'd been dismissed and underestimated. Her first dart missed the double ring needed to start scoring, landing in the single section. A few snickers could be heard from Frank's corner. "Nerves getting to her," someone commented loudly. Valerie took a deep breath, refocusing. Her second dart hit double 16, officially starting her score. Her third landed in triple 20. Not a perfect opening, but she was on the board. Frank stepped up with a swagger, hitting double 20 with his first dart and following with two triple 20s. An exceptional start. He turned to the crowd, arms raised, soaking in their cheers. "That's how it's done, sweetheart," he said as he returned to the waiting area. Valerie didn't respond, maintaining her composure. The first game continued with both players performing at their peak. Frank won it narrowly, finishing on double 8 while Valerie still needed 36 points. "One down, 2 to go," Frank announced, high-fiving his friends. The second game started similarly, with Frank taking an early lead. But midway through, Valerie found her rhythm. Her darts began landing exactly where she aimed, triple 20 after triple 20, with mechanical precision. She closed out the game with a brilliant finish, triple 20, single 5, double 18. Perfect mathematics. "We're tied," Bill announced. "One game apiece." Frank's cocky demeanor had diminished slightly. He stepped up for the third game with more focus and less showboating. The crowd grew quieter as the match intensified. Both players were throwing at an extraordinary level, drawing gasps and appreciative murmurs from even the most experienced players in the room. Valerie won the third game. Frank took the fourth. With the match tied at 2 games each, everything came down to the final game. As Valerie prepared for her turn, she looked down at her father's darts and whispered, "This one's for you, Dad." The final game began with Frank winning the bull off for first throw. He started confidently with a score of 120, giving Valerie a challenging psychological target to match. She stepped up to the line, the bar now completely silent. This was the moment. Everything that had happened throughout the evening had led to this. The mockery, the doubt, the growing respect, all culminating in this final game. Valerie stood at the throw line, her posture perfect, just as her father had taught her. She raised her first dart, aiming for the triple 20 segment. "She'll choke," Frank muttered to his friends, just loud enough for Valerie to hear. She released the dart. It flew in a perfect arc, landing precisely in the triple 20 section. Without hesitation, she threw her second dart, another triple 20, then her third, a third consecutive triple 20. A perfect score, 180 points, the highest possible in a single round of darts. The bar erupted in astonishment. Even the most skeptical observers couldn't deny the breathtaking skill they had just witnessed. Under the most intense pressure, Valerie had thrown a perfect round. "Did you see that?" Bill exclaimed, his professional composure momentarily abandoned. 3 triple 20s, a 180 to start the deciding game. Frank's face had drained of color. He stepped up for his turn, but his rhythm was broken. His darts landed in the single sections, a mediocre score of 43. As the game progressed, Valerie maintained her focus, consistently outscoring Frank. The gap widened with each round. When she stepped up for what could be her final throw, she needed double 16 to win. Time seemed to slow down. Valerie blocked out everything: the crowd, Frank's glare, even Melissa's encouraging smile. It was just her, the dart, and the board, just like those countless evenings playing with her father. The dart left her fingers with perfect form, striking the double 16 dead center. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then the bar exploded in applause and cheers. Patrons who had been sneering at her presence hours earlier were now on their feet, witnessing something they'd talk about for years to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bill announced over the noise, "we have our champion, Valerie Simmons." As the crowd continued cheering, Valerie felt a strange mixture of emotions: pride, vindication, but most of all, a deep sense of connection to her father. She could almost feel his hand on her shoulder. hear his voice saying, "That's my girl." Frank approached, his earlier bravado gone. He extended his hand. "Impressive playing," he managed, the words clearly difficult for him. "Where'd you really learn to throw like that?" Valerie shook his hand firmly. "I told you, my father taught me. Sometimes the simple truth is the hardest to believe." Tommy approached with the tournament prize, $500 in cash and a small trophy that had Frank's name engraved on it for the past 3 years. "Might need to get a new nameplate for this," he joked, handing it to Valerie. As she accepted the trophy, a gentleman in his 70s made his way through the crowd. He wore a Navy veteran's cap and walked with the assistance of a cane. His weathered face broke into a broad smile as he reached Valerie. "Commander Wilson," Valerie said, recognizing her father's old Navy buddy. "Couldn't miss it when I heard Frank might finally get dethroned," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "Your dad would have been proud, Val. Hell, he is proud, wherever he is." Tears welled in Valerie's eyes for the first time that evening. "You think so?" "I know so. Those darts," he nodded at the case in her hand. "They always were magic in the right hands." Around them, the atmosphere in O'Malley's had transformed. Where there had been dismissal and mockery hours earlier, there was now respect and curiosity. Several patrons approached Valerie to congratulate her, including some who had laughed at her initial appearance. Jake, the younger player she'd defeated in the semifinals, pushed through with a beer for her. "That was the most incredible darts I've ever seen," he said earnestly. "Any chance you'd be interested in joining our league? We could use someone with your skill." Before Valerie could respond, Bill chimed in. "The regional tournament is in 3 weeks. As our local champion, you've qualified." Melissa squeezed her arm excitedly. "You have to do it, Val. This is just the beginning." Valerie looked around at the faces surrounding her. Commander Wilson with his proud smile, Melissa's enthusiastic encouragement, Jake's genuine admiration, and even Frank, who stood at the edge of the group, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the sport he dominated for so long. For years, she'd kept her talent hidden away, playing only for herself and the memory of her father. But tonight had awakened something, not just the competitive spirit, but the realization that her gift didn't have to remain private. It could be shared, celebrated, and used to break down barriers. "Maybe I will," she said finally, running her fingers over the smooth surface of the trophy. "But first, I think I need to practice." This drew laughter from the crowd, given what they'd just witnessed. Commander Wilson patted her shoulder. "Your dad always said you were better than him. Now the whole world gets to see it." As the night wound down and patrons began to disperse, Valerie carefully packed her father's darts back into their case. Tonight, they had been more than just instruments of a game. They had been conduits connecting past to present, father to daughter, private passion to public recognition. The following Thursday, Valerie returned to O'Malley's. This time, there were no surprised looks or snide comments. Instead, heads turned with recognition and respect as she made her way through the crowd. "The champ returns!" Tommy called from behind the bar. "Your usual club soda?" Valerie smiled, nodding. It felt strange to have a usual at a place where, just a week ago, she'd felt like an unwelcome outsider. The corner where the dartboards hung was busier than usual. Several women were among the players, something Valerie couldn't recall seeing before. "You've started something," Melissa said, appearing at her side. "Sarah from my office brought her daughter tonight. The girl's been begging to learn ever since she heard about you." Valerie watched as a young girl, no more than 12, threw a dart under her mother's guidance. The child's face lit up when it struck the board, even though it was nowhere near her intended target. "Val!" Frank's voice boomed from across the room. The gruffness remained, but the hostility had evaporated. "There she is! Come settle a debate, would you?" To Valerie's surprise, Frank had assembled a small group of serious players, including Jake and some faces she recognized from the tournament. They were discussing technique, and apparently, her opinion now carried weight. "What's the debate?" she asked, approaching. "Jake here says your follow-through is what makes your accuracy so consistent. I think it's your stance. Who's right?" Valerie couldn't help but smile at the irony. The same man who dismissed her presence was now treating her as an authority. "Both matter," she said, "but it's really about finding what works for your natural throwing motion. My dad always said forcing a technique that feels unnatural is a recipe for inconsistency. Frank nodded thoughtfully. Smart man, your dad. The smartest, Valerie agreed. Over the next hour, Valerie found herself doing something she'd never imagined, coaching others on dart technique. Veterans like Frank asked pointed questions about specific aspects of her game, while newcomers sought basic guidance. She answered each question with patience and clarity, channeling her father's teaching style. When the gathering finally broke up, Commander Wilson appeared at her side, watching as a group of players practiced with renewed purpose. You've changed things around here, he observed. I just played darts, Valerie replied modestly. Commander Wilson chuckled. Your father said the same thing after he integrated that officers' club in Yokosuka back in '82. I just played darts, he told me. But we both know it's never just about the game. Valerie nodded, understanding the deeper truth in his words. Sometimes the simplest actions, showing up, doing what you love, being authentically yourself, can break down barriers in ways that grand gestures never could. As she prepared to leave, Tommy handed her a flyer. Regional tournament information, he explained. We're all planning to be there. O'Malley's is proud to sponsor our champion. Valerie took the flyer, a new sense of purpose filling her heart. What had begun as a private tribute to her father had become something more, a beginning rather than an ending, a door opening to possibilities she'd never allowed herself to imagine. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Where are you watching from? Has someone ever underestimated your abilities, only to be surprised by your talent? Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us to look beyond appearances and recognize the extraordinary potential in every person. Sometimes, the most remarkable talents come from the most unexpected sources. Until next time.